Welcome in, guys. Matt from Total Drummer here. It's a bit of a practical lesson today. We're not learning beats or fills or any of that. We're going to look at how to change the snare wires on your snare drum. So this is often overlooked by drummers, but it's really important. And I get asked by students all the time, what do I do about this thing? My snare sounds terrible. The common assumption is they need to spend £300 on a new snare, when actually they don't. It just needs a bit of TLC. And one of the causes for the annoying sound or the whatever the problem is, often this is one of the reasons. So we're going to check it out today. Right, guys, so what we're talking about with the snare wires are these snare strands underneath the snare drum. So every snare has that. That's what gives it the distinctive sound. That's really what separates it from a tom-tom. You know, if we take those off, it sounds more or less like a tom-tom. So there are variations on the attachments and the mechanisms between brands and models, but more or less it's the same thing. So I'm just going to show you very briefly today, and you're just going to have to figure out your one. It might be a little bit different to mine. This is a Pearl snare drum. It's my old Pearl Masters custom snare drum. So you might have slightly different ways of it attaching here, slightly different mechanisms, but it's more or less the same. So first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to disengage the snare drum. So you'll have a lever on the side here, and we're going to turn those off. And that's actually just going to loosen them a little bit. It was off, I put it on. So once you turn those off, it's just going to loosen them a bit. So you've got a little bit of play. Obviously, when the drum's the right way up, that brings them down off the snare drum and gives us that sound. When we engage them, it's back to a snare drum sound. Okay, so say disengage them and turn it upside down. Now there are a number of reasons why you might change the snares. You might want more strands. So this has got 20 wires on it. So you might want more to get a more snare buzz. You might need to just need to adjust them because sometimes they come loose. They might break. Okay, that happens very easy. So there's a number of reasons. You can probably, I don't know if you can see it on the camera there, but I've got a strand that's been broken. Someone's fiddled around with it. I don't know, maybe one of my kids, they sneak in here and touch, I don't know. They're at that kind of height where, one of them is anyway, they can get under the snare. And I find stuff like this all the time broken in here, and it's often them. So, but that can happen really easily because these are quite delicate. So if people are touching these or they just get a bit old, that will happen, and they need to be changed. So you can see this is attached at both ends. This particular model has strings attached to it. So the one I'm going to put on has these strips. These are nice kind of ribbon material strips. So there's a couple of different variations on the way these are attached, but it's more or less the same thing. Now this particular model as well is attached using just regular tension rods, which I have to disengage with a drum key. So what I'm going to do, I've already loosened it. I like to just have a little visual look at this and just think, right, that's roughly where it's going to sit, you know? And if my new one, although it's a different model, if my new one's similar in height, which it is, or in length, sorry, I know it's going to be roughly in the same place. So I've kind of had a look, I know roughly where that's going to sit. So what I'm going to do now is just loosen one end of this. I'm not going to loosen it all the way, I'm just going to loosen it enough so that the strings pull free. And I can see these strings are pretty chewed up. So if I were just changing the snare wires and I didn't have those ribbons there, I'd be looking at these strings and I probably would want to change those as well because these are completely chewed up. Normally, if you buy new snare wires, they'll come with the attachments. But if you've just got one line around that you're going to put on, you haven't got the attachments, that's not really going to cut it. That's going to have been bent out of shape, and really want to replace that as well. There are loads of ways you can do it. There's actually a video you can find on Total Drummer's channel which shows some different ways, some things you can do with a snare drum skin, and one of those is to cut strips from the snare skin if you need to, and make a strip. You can just get some string. You want it to be decent quality so it's not going to stretch, because if it stretches, the tension will change. Or you can just go out and buy some, but just it's a good chance to check this sort of thing whilst we're doing it. So we've totally disengaged one side, and now I'm going to disengage the other side as well. And those are pretty chewed up. I mean, they've been on there quite a while actually. And now that can be thrown away. We don't need that. Okay, so now we're ready to put the new snare wires on. So we've got these, and what you want to make sure is if you look at these, you'll find that they're joined to these end plates here, and we want to make sure you turn them the right way up so that the actual snare wires are closest to the skin. If you have it the wrong way up, so like that metal plate at either end sticks up on this side, the wire's attached on the underside. If you have it the wrong way up, the snares aren't touching the resonant head anymore, so they're not really going to do their job. Their whole job is when you hit the drum, air flies through the drum, it resonates, the bottom head resonates, why it's called the resonant head, and so it vibrates, and that in turn excites these snare wires and it gives us the snare buzz. So if the snare wires aren't touching the skin, they won't do their job. Okay, so I'm just going to feed that through. So we're coming right here through the snare rim. You've got these, you know, you've got these gaps here, so you can pass it through there. And with this particular one, I'm actually going to take one side completely off, and I'm going to put my strips in place and then just do it up a little bit. And I'm not going to do it up all the way yet because I've got to get it all in position first. So I repeat that process round on the other side. Get that into place. Do it up, and then I'm just going to position it and get it exactly where I want it. And right now I'm just checking there's no kind of kinks in there. Okay, the bottom ribbon there just got caught on something, so I'm just making sure that's free. So everything's unrestricted, everything's looking good. Okay, and then I'm just gonna finger tighten those, so there's a little tiny bit of tension, but I want to position these snare wires on the top here. I want to position them so they're in the right place, similar to where they were before. Now, it depends on your snare mechanism. You might want that completely equidistant in the middle. Right, so it's got the same distance from both ends. But if you've got one side which is fixed, like I have here, which is really, really common, a lot of snares have this, you might find you want it pulled a little bit more to that fixed side because it's the other side that has the snare mechanism on it. So when you pull that up, it's going to bring tension on this side, which is going to pull the snares across. And then they'll sit in the middle. If you start in the middle and then it pulls it across, it's going to be slightly off center. I hope that makes sense. So if you've got that mechanism, you may want to just start with it slightly more towards the fixed side with the aim of it then ending up in the middle once it's tensioned. And we're not pulling it that tight at this point because, number one, I might have to tweak it, so there's no point really doing it up tight. But number two, I still have to apply tension to it. So I've got it in the position I think it's in, I think it should be in. And then I've put I've re-engaged the snares and it's pulled tension onto this side, which has in turn pulled them across, okay? So we're more or less in the middle there. More or less in the middle. I might muck around with that in a minute, but I'm not going to bore you with doing it. It's very slightly over too far. So what I might do now is just loosen both ends again, disengage the snare first, loosen both sides, just pull it back like a millimetre back towards the fixed side, do it all back up again, do it up, and then hopefully it will sit exactly in the middle. Okay, so that's it. Once you're completely happy with the position of that, then you can just go ahead with your drum key or screwdriver if you've got a different mechanism here, whatever it is to tighten it, and give those a real good tighten so they're not going to slip, right? So that's your final tightening to keep them in position. And then you can turn that over and you should have something that sounds like a snare drum at that point. Let's see. Okay, so at the moment, that is barely doing anything. Okay, I'm not hearing the snares at all. So what I'm going to do with that now is I'm going to use this opportunity to pull it back over slightly, and then I'm going to And then I'm going to tighten it a little bit more because I've actually done that far too loose. Okay, so I've got the snare roughly where I want it now. I had to sort of tweak it and tune it, you know, move the snare wires back and forth a bit to get roughly where I wanted. Don't be afraid to experiment and try. You will find different rooms, different acoustics, different environments that are going to affect your snare, so don't be afraid to tweak it. Now, you don't have to get it perfect underneath. You want to get it in the right kind of area. But you don't have to get it perfect because you've actually got a dial on the side, most probably, where you can just kind of fine tension those snare wires to get it exactly where you want it. So if it's a bit loose, you can use these just to slightly adjust it without having to faff around underneath. This particular snare drum is great. I mean, I've got this on a couple of pearl snares whereby it's got 4 positions for the lever. So I've got off, I've got on a bit more, and then really on. So if I want to change the tension between 2 songs, I want to go from really tight and snappy to a bit more buzzy, I don't have to faff around at all. I can just move the lever and I've got a different snare sound. I love that feature. But other brands might not have that, but you'll have a dial there, so you can tweak that. So that's roughly how to do it. Don't be afraid to experiment, as I say. Muck around with it. You'll learn how to quickly get the sound you want from the buzzes, from the snare wires. So if you like this, hit subscribe. I mean, there's loads more videos coming. There's already loads out there. Some of them are about equipment, and some of them are about learning different beats and feels. So there's loads coming. So hit subscribe. If you want to know more about looking after your gear, hit the links under this video because we've got some other free videos on things like tuning drums, some basic tuning stuff. There's also a full course there that shows you how to tune the drums and get the whole kit sounding good as one instrument. So check that out as well. But for now, good luck with your snare wires, and I'll see you on the next lesson.